In the forgotten archives of the Diocese of Wisconsin, there lies a cache of documents the Catholic Church has tried to suppress for more than 160 years. These papers describe the organized vanishing of 23 nuns from St. Mary's Convent near Lake Michigan between 1854 and 1862. Church officials waved these records away as clerical mistakes and misunderstandings. Yet the testimonies from 3 separate dioceses and inspectors, together with a trove of private correspondence discovered recently inside a sealed wall during renovations, tell a tale so monstrous that even hardened historians have wondered whether such evil could truly have taken root within hallowed walls. What follows is the first full account of what many call the most unsettling instance of religious corruption in American history. A case the Catholic Church spent lavishly to ensure you'd never hear of. Before we continue with St. Mary's Convent, a brief request. If you're already finding this story disturbing, subscribe to our channel for more rigorously researched accounts of America's darkest religious secrets. Our mystery-seeking community spans all 50 states. Where are you listening from tonight? Leave a comment below. Now let's return to rural Wisconsin in 1854, where this story begins. The morning fog lay thick over Lake Michigan as Bishop William Quarter's carriage rolled through the gates of the property that would become St. Mary's Convent. The Catholic Church had acquired the sprawling estate, a former lumber baron's mansion set on 30 acres of dense woods, with the intention of founding the first major Catholic institution in a largely Protestant Wisconsin territory. This calculated expansion formed part of a broader effort to extend Catholic influence across America's rapidly developing frontier, where Protestant denominations already held strong footing. The limestone mansion, with 3 commanding wings and a bell tower, stood in harsh contrast to the modest wooden churches dotted across the Wisconsin landscape. The main building, erected in 1842, featured Gothic arches and slender windows that seemed to watch over the countryside like eyes. 2 wings reached out from either side, the east intended for the nuns' quarters, the west for the planned orphanage and infirmary. Behind the central structure stood a small chapel, its spire lifting above the treetops, visible for miles across the flat Wisconsin plain. Local Protestant families received the arriving nuns with suspicion, their black habits and Irish accents marking them as outsiders in a community of German and Scandinavian settlers. The residents, chiefly Lutheran and Methodist, were accustomed to the simple, democratic structure of their congregations. Catholicism's hierarchical nature, with rites and secrets, felt alien and threatening. At the convent's consecration, a small crowd gathered at the gates. "Papists," muttered Elijah Hoffman, a respected elder of the local Lutheran church, watching the robed figures process into the chapel. "They'll bring their foreign ways and corrupt our children with idolatry." His companion, Wilhelm Schmidt, nodded grimly. "My grandfather fled Germany to escape Catholic persecution. Now they've followed us even here." Though not universal, this sentiment reflected the deep religious tensions that would frame the tragedy to come. "St. Mary's will be a beacon of God's mercy in this wilderness," Bishop Quarter proclaimed to the assembled clergy and local dignitaries at the consecration. His voice rang through the newly completed chapel, morning light filtering through simple stained glass, pooling colored light across wooden pews. Under Mother Superior Catherine Murphy's guidance, this convent will shelter orphans, comfort widows, and tend the sick. The bishop's Boston accent echoed off the stone as he introduced the 3 women who would lead: Mother Superior Catherine, Sister Elizabeth Foster, and Sister Margaret Clark, each from established Eastern convents. Mother Superior Catherine stood tall and imposing in a crisp black habit, sharp-featured with a gaze that commanded instant respect. At 42, she bore the confidence of long authority. Her hands, elegant yet strong, looked equally capable of soothing a child or disciplining a wayward novice. People remarked on her eyes, a pale blue that seemed to see through pretense. "Mother Catherine comes highly recommended," the bishop continued. Her work at St. Augustine's in Boston has prepared her for the challenges of frontier religious life. Sister Elizabeth, 38, with a perpetual smile and soft voice, would oversee the orphanage. Plump, maternal, With rosy cheeks and gentle hands, she seemed perfectly suited to the care of abandoned children. She spoke with a slight hesitation, as if weighing each word, initially read as thoughtfulness rather than calculation. Sister Margaret, 35, would establish the infirmary with her wide knowledge of herbal remedies. Tall and thin, with a serious manner and nimble fingers, she carried herself like someone who measured medicines by the drop. Nothing escaped her dark eyes. Doctors in Boston and New York had been impressed by her grasp of traditional and modern practices. 20 younger nuns, most in their 20s and newly arrived from Ireland, completed the founding community. They stood in a perfect line, habits crisp, heads bowed, as Bishop Quarter blessed each by name: Sister Agnes O'Connor, Sister Bernadette Walsh, Sister Teresa Donovan, Sister Mary Collins, young women who'd left family and homeland to serve God in a strange country. Though solemn during the ceremony, their faces betrayed youth and uncertainty when they thought no one watched. "The Lord has called us to this wilderness," Mother Catherine addressed her sisters that first evening, candlelight throwing long shadows across the refectory. The smell of fresh bread and weak tea hung in the air. Wisconsin's autumn chill seeped in despite the large fireplace at the room's end. "We will face hardships unknown to our eastern counterparts. We will meet suspicion from those who fear our faith. But devotion and sacrifice will see us through." Far from home and family, the young nuns clung to her words like a lifeline. In the dormitory that night, Sister Agnes whispered to Sister Bernadette, their narrow cots separated by barely an arm's length, "Do you think the locals will accept us?" Her voice trembled despite her brave face all day. "They feared our Lord once too," Bernadette murmured, squeezing her hand in the dark. "We must show them through our works. We mean only good." Their whispering ended abruptly at footsteps in the corridor, Mother Catherine making rounds, ensuring all was in order the first night. The convent quickly settled into the rhythm of religious life. Daily prayers began with matins at 3 a.m., the bells toll cutting the pre-dawn black, rousing sleepy nuns from warm beds to cold chapel floors. The low drone of Latin chant filled the chapel 7 times a day, from those early prayers to Compline at 9 p.m., becoming as much a part of the local soundscape as wind through pines or distant cattle lowing. Between offices, the sisters ran a small orphanage, tended the sick in a modest infirmary, and worked extensive gardens. Days kept a strict order: prayer, work, simple meals, brief recreation, more prayer, a rhythm meant to fix the mind on God and service rather than personal comfort. By winter 1854, the orphanage held 12 children, mostly offspring of Irish labourers killed in railway or lumber accidents. Sister Elizabeth oversaw them tenderly, teaching letters and numbers alongside Catholic doctrine. On Sundays, local families sometimes visited after Mass, bringing small treats and inquiring at times about adoption. Sister Margaret's infirmary began modestly but soon earned respect. Traditional remedies, poultices for inflammation, herbal teas for fevers, compresses for chest ailments, proved effective, especially in Wisconsin's harsh winter when reaching a doctor meant hazardous travel through snow-choked roads. Even the skeptics were impressed by the community's self-sufficiency, and attitudes shifted from suspicion to grudging respect. "They keep to themselves, but they do good work," Elijah Hoffman conceded after Sister Margaret cured his grandson's cough. "Their ways aren't ours, but perhaps there's room in this big country for different paths to heaven." At 23, Sister Agnes O'Connor was among the youngest. Her letters home, preserved in the Dublin Diocesan archives, offer a rare window into those early months. Her careful pen filled pages with observations, though attentive readers note the tone changing as time passed. "The work is harder than I imagined," she wrote in December 1854. The paper smudged, suggesting tears. "My hands are raw from linens washed in ice-cold water. The chapel stones feel like ice beneath our knees. But Mother Catherine tells us our sacrifices please God." "Sister Elizabeth has been especially kind," she continued. "Extra blankets on the coldest nights, such patience teaching me to care for the orphans. Sister Margaret's remedies saved us when fever swept the orphanage last month. The children burned so fiercely we feared we'd lose them all, but her tincture of willow bark and honey brought their temperatures down. I believe we are doing God's Work, though I confess I still cry myself to sleep. Missing the green hills of home. What those letters don't show, what Agnes herself may not have fully recognized, were subtle shifts already taking hold inside St. Mary's. Mother Catherine's leadership, at first merely strict, drifted toward autocratic. Minor rule breaches, once corrected gently, now drew increasingly harsh penances. One January evening, 1855, Sister Josephine Brady's hands shook as she tried to darn a tear in her habit. She had coughed unexpectedly during prayers and was sentenced to kneel on dried peas while reciting the entire rosary, a penance that left her knees bleeding. Sister Mary Collins helped thread her needle. Their eyes met in silent sympathy. Do not highlight her weakness. Mother Catherine's voice cut the quiet, making both women start. She had appeared silently, a skill that unsettled the younger nuns. Discipline is the cornerstone of devotion. Let that be remembered. By spring 1855, St. Mary's had a reputation for exceptional charity. When measles broke through nearby lumber camps, Sister Margaret tended dozens regardless of faith. Donations trickled in, and even Protestant ministers acknowledged the good behind those limestone walls. Yet within, life was changing in quiet, disturbing ways. Communal meals grew ever more silent, eyes fixed on thin soup and plain bread. Recreation hours, once dotted with soft conversation and occasional laughter, became tense and muted. Young women who had crossed an ocean together now moved like shadows, careful not to attract notice. The first strange event came in April 1855, when Sister Agnes didn't appear for morning prayers, one empty space in the chapel where 20 should stand in perfect formation. As Mother Catherine entered, the others exchanged quick, worried glances. Sister Agnes has been called to assist at our mission in Minnesota, Mother Catherine announced at breakfast, tone allowing no questions. Her departure was sudden, as such callings often are. Pray for her success. Sister Bernadette's spoon clattered, but Mother, she said nothing to me. She fell silent beneath Mother Catherine's pale gaze. Are you suggesting, Sister, that a bride of Christ must seek permission from peers rather than superiors to answer God's call? Frosty silence. No, Mother. Forgive me. No one had seen Agnes pack. She had written nothing of a transfer, but in the strict hierarchy no one pressed further. That evening, several noticed that Agnes's few possessions, her prayer book, wooden rosary from her mother, extra wool stockings, were gone, as if she had left. But Sister Mary, whose cot was beside Agnes's, whispered to Sister Teresa in the garden, her cloak still hangs on its peg. Would she leave without it in April in Minnesota? Teresa glanced at the windows. Perhaps they gave her a new one. We shouldn't speculate. 3 months later, Sister Bernadette vanished the same way. The bishop has asked for her assistance in Chicago, Mother Catherine said. She left before dawn to catch the early train. Again, no farewell, only an empty cell and haste. Sister Elizabeth added, her skill with the orphans made her ideal to help set procedures at the new foundling home. The words fit, but her warm eyes remained cold. By winter 1855, 3 more had transferred to far missions, each disappearance following the same pattern. Letters to their supposed destinations returned months later with brief, oddly formal replies, later determined by handwriting experts to have been penned by a single person, not the missing nuns. Among the few who voiced concern was Sister Teresa Donovan, tall, strong from farm work, unusually direct for convent life. She had already drawn Mother Catherine's disapproval for questioning harsher penances. It's strange Rome would request so many transfers without proper documents, she whispered to Sister Mary in summer 1856 as they harvested early carrots. The garden had expanded, a new medicinal section tended by Sister Margaret behind a high fence only she and Mother Catherine entered. And have you noticed? It's always the youngest and prettiest. First Agnes with her golden hair, then Bernadette with that lovely singing, then Catherine's perfect complexion, then Josephine with her. She stopped as a shadow fell. Sister Mary hushed her, cutting a glance toward the windows where Sister Margaret watched, face unreadable. We must trust her wisdom. The next week, Teresa was gone. called to a contemplative retreat in Montreal, the official line at morning prayers. Terrified, Sister Mary kept her head down. That evening, making her bed, she found a page torn from Teresa's prayer book tucked under her pillow, a rushed margin note. Something is wrong. If I disappear, tell Father Ryan. Fresh ink sent a chill through Mary. By 1857, the pattern was impossible to ignore within St. Mary's. Of the original 20 junior nuns, only 12 remained. Explanations persisted. Special missions, retreats, nursing and epidemics. Outside, all looked normal. Families still came to the infirmary. Orphans were still cared for. Sunday visitors saw solemn processions of black-clad figures and suspected nothing. Inside, fear had gained form. The remaining sisters whispered, avoided being alone, watched as their numbers dwindled. Mother Catherine grew more authoritarian. Minor infractions brought severe penances, days of fasting, nights of prayer on cold stone, public confessions of ever more intimate sins. When Sister Clare was found with a piece of chocolate from home, she was made to kneel and confess gluttony and deception. 3 days fast, water and a single piece of bread. When she fainted at prayers on day 2, it was Sister Margaret who revived her with smelling salts, her thin lips curved in what some later described as a smile. One bitter January night, 1858, Sister Mary Collins awoke to muffled sounds through the thin wall from the neighboring cell. She heard Sister Rebecca Murphy sobbing, then a sharp whisper she knew belonged to Mother Catherine. You will come with us now. Make any noise and you'll regret it. Shuffling footsteps followed, then silence. Mary lay frozen in her narrow bed, heart pounding. The corridor creaked, 1, 2, 3 sets moving away, then a sound that would haunt her. A muffled cry, quickly stifled, followed by the drag of weight. The next morning, Mother Catherine announced Rebecca had been called to a Dakota mission. The native children require instruction, and Sister Rebecca's patience suits her. Her gaze paused on Mary. We shall miss her gentle presence and rejoice in God's purpose. Shaking, Mary endured prayers, beads clicking in trembling fingers as her mind raced. What had happened to Rebecca and to the others? That afternoon, sweeping outside Mother Catherine's office, Mary overheard a conversation through the not-quite-closed door. The dustbrush froze in her hand. The doctor says this one will fetch a higher price. Sister Elizabeth's gentle voice, now cold and calculating. Men pay extra for the innocent ones. We must be more careful with timing, Sister Margaret replied, glass clinking, organizing medicines. 3 in 1 month raises questions. The bishop's secretary mentioned it. The bishop is easily handled. Mother Catherine's dismissive laugh cut the air. Another donation to his cathedral fund and his questions vanish. No one doubts nuns sent to frontier missions or dying during charity work. What about the Collins girl? Sister Margaret asked low. She watches. I've seen her listening at doors. A pause. Mary's heart nearly stopped. We'll wait, Mother Catherine said at last. Too plain to fetch much, and her seminary brother writes her. Too many disappearances at once draws notice. Rebecca will keep the doctor's clients satisfied for now. Mary fled, mind reeling. The pieces aligned with a dreadful click. The missing nuns, always young and lovely. The well-dressed benefactors touring with Mother. Strange noises from the locked north wing. The convent's sudden wealth. After a sleepless night of prayer, Mary made a desperate choice. During her weekly duty collecting eggs, the only time she was permitted beyond the walls unsupervised, she slipped a hurried note into the pocket of Jimmy Fletcher, a 12-year-old farm boy who delivered milk each morning. Jimmy's eyes widened. The rules forbade casual talk with outsiders, especially males. Take this to Father Thomas at St. Joseph's, she whispered, pressing a small silver cross into his palm. Her confirmation gift, the only valuable thing she owned. Tell no one. Lives depend on it. Yes, sister, I promise. The note, preserved in diocesan records, read, Something evil is happening at St. Mary's. Nuns are disappearing, not sent away as claimed. I fear for my life. Please send help. Sister Mary Collins. Father Thomas Ryan, young Irish priest, had long harbored doubts. During monthly mass, he'd noticed dwindling numbers and found the explanations thin. But as a parish priest, he had little standing to challenge a mother superior. He paced his small study, reading Mary's message again and again, the silver cross heavy in his palm. Such a gift wasn't surrendered lightly. Action was required, but what action against a well-connected superior? Rather than confront Catherine, Father Ryan rode to Milwaukee to see Bishop John Henney. The journey took a day by horseback through late winter ice and mud. He arrived cassock-spattered, resolve set. Received in a warm, comfortable study, far grander than his humble parish, Father Ryan first listened as the bishop, animated, spoke about the new St. John's Cathedral. "The finest west of New York," Henney declared in a thick German accent. "A monument to our faith in this Protestant wilderness." When at last asked about his parish, Ryan carefully laid out his concerns: dwindling nuns, inconsistent explanations, the desperate note. The bishop's face went from genial to carefully neutral. "These accusations are serious," he said, setting the cross aside without close look. "Mother Catherine has satisfied me regarding each transfer. But, Your Excellency, 8 nuns in under 3 years, no proper documentation, no consistent letters afterward." "The frontier requires educated women," Henney replied, rising to signal the meeting's end. "I will not have you spreading rumors that harm the church in a Protestant region. Mother Catherine has been generous in supporting the cathedral fund. Her leadership is beyond reproach." Ushering him out, the bishop added a warning: "Attend your parish duties. Father Ryan, leave convent administration to those appointed by God." Disappointed but undeterred, Ryan decided proper channels would not help. Another way must be found. Opportunity came in March 1858, when Bishop Henney assigned Father Ryan to collect annual financial reports across the diocese, an official role giving him reason to examine St. Mary's books and perhaps find proof. March winds cut through his heavy coat as his buggy approached St. Mary's. The place looked altered, gardens neglected, windows dark despite mild spring, the bell tower ringing less often and with a dull tone. At the door, Sister Elizabeth's customary smile looked strained. Dark circles shadowed her eyes. Her habit showed small neglect, a missing pin, a faint stain. "Father Ryan, we weren't expecting you," she said, leading him not to Mother's comfortable study but to a small, cold parlor. "Mother Catherine is indisposed. Leave the forms. She'll complete them by week's end." "I'm afraid the bishop was clear," Ryan said, removing his coat, placing his briefcase on the table, trying to project authority he didn't fully feel. "I must review the records personally. Financial irregularities have been found elsewhere." "That won't be possible," Elizabeth replied, smile gone. "Our bookkeeper, Sister Margaret, is attending a dying child." "Then I shall wait," he said firmly. "Perhaps I could tour the convent meanwhile. I've heard of improvements in the orphanage." A flicker, fear, anger, crossed her face and vanished. "As you wish, Father, but avoid the north wing. Influenza cases, we wouldn't expose you." The north wing, the area he had never been allowed to enter, supposedly the sisters' private quarters. Suspicion deepened. The tour revealed a convent operating far below its reported capacity. Where were the 20 orphans? He counted only 7, thin and frightened. When he tried to speak to a small girl sweeping the dormitory, Elizabeth quickly sent her away. The infirmary, said to be full of locals ill with influenza, held 3 elderly patients, none influenza-stricken, and Sister Margaret was nowhere to be seen. Most striking, the reduced number of nuns. 3 months earlier, he'd counted at least 15. Today, 8, including Elizabeth. Inquiring after specific sisters, Rebecca, Josephine, Claire, he received the same vague lines. "And Sister Mary Collins?" he asked casually as they passed the laundry, steam rising around reddened hands. Elizabeth's step hitched slightly. "Assigned to our St. Louis mission, left just last week. Her orphanage experience suits the work." Ryan nodded, masking alarm. The note's author had now disappeared. He asked to see the chapel before departing. Once immaculate, it now showed subtle neglect. Dust on altar rails, unpolished candlesticks, wilting flowers. The sacred space felt hollow, as if the stone sensed a wrongness. While Elizabeth was momentarily distracted by a novice's message, Ryan slipped through a side door toward the residential wing. The corridor was silent for mid-afternoon. Many cells stood empty, personal items gone as if their occupants had truly departed. Then, an almost inaudible sound, something between whimper and moan from behind a heavy wooden door with a substantial iron lock at the end of the corridor. He approached, listening. The sound came again, human, distressed. "Is someone there?" He whispered through the keyhole. "Do you need help?" Silence, then a hoarse female voice. "Father, is that you? Please, help us, please." Before he could answer, Mother Catherine's unmistakable voice rang behind him. "Father Ryan, this area is cloistered. Your presence is most inappropriate." He turned to find her flanked by Sister Margaret and a large man in laborer's clothes, arms thick as trunks, face set in threat. "Forgive me, Mother," Ryan said, keeping his voice steady. "I became turned around after the chapel." Her pale eyes assessed him. She looked thinner, habit looser, authority sharper. This wing houses sisters under special spiritual direction. Their seclusion is essential. "I heard someone calling for help." "You heard Sister Anne in her spiritual exercises," Sister Margaret said smoothly. "Some of our devoted practice mortification of the flesh. Their cries are easily misread by those unfamiliar with advanced devotions. Mr. Callahan will show you out." Mother nodded to the burly man. "We'll send the financial reports by week's end." Callahan gripped Ryan's arm with needless force. "This way, Father." Ryan cast one last glance at the locked door. The voice had said us. How many were inside? Once clear of the gates, he whipped the horse to a gallop. The voice, the lock, the missing nuns, the frightened children, Callahan's intimidation, together spelled something far darker than he could handle alone. Bypassing Bishop Henney, whom he now suspected of complicity or willful blindness, he sent an urgent telegram to Archbishop John Hughes in New York. Grave concerns. St. Mary's Convent, Wisconsin. Suspicious disappearances of multiple nuns. Evidence of imprisonment. Possible danger to remaining sisters. Request immediate diocesan investigation. Local bishop unresponsive. For Thomas Ryan, St. Joseph's. If a chill is running down your spine, you're not alone. Our mystery community often reports visceral reactions to these accounts. Like, share with a friend who loves true historical mysteries and subscribe to help us keep uncovering America's hidden secrets. Back to 1858. A storm was about to break over St. Mary's that would reveal horrors beyond imagining. Archbishop Hughes, famed for a no-nonsense management style, moved swiftly. Rather than tip off Bishop Henney, he dispatched his personal secretary, Monsignor Patrick Kelly, to conduct a surprise inspection. Monsignor Kelly arrived unannounced on April 17, 1858, with Father Ryan and two senior priests from neighboring parishes. A clear, mild spring morning, the sort that lifts farmers' hopes, hung strangely heavy over St. Mary's limestone buildings. Ravens circled the bell tower, their calls tearing the quiet. The reception spoke volumes. Mother Catherine, usually composed, looked flustered, pale face flushed with anger or fear at the sight of Kelly's official robes and sealed documents. The convent seemed in disarray, nuns hurrying in what looked like panic. Through an open window, Ryan glimpsed two young sisters carrying armfuls of papers toward the kitchen, where the cast-iron stove burned despite the warmth. The acrid scent of burning paper drifted over the courtyard. "This is most irregular, Monsignor," Catherine protested as they entered the main hall, voice brittle. "Official visitations follow protocol. Bishop Henney always sends notice weeks ahead." "Which is precisely why the Archbishop directed me to forego notice," Kelly replied coolly. In his 50s, silver-haired, weathered by experience of war and peace, he projected an authority even Catherine struggled to challenge. He produced a letter bearing the Archbishop's seal. "I am empowered to inspect this institution, its records, and all residents, fully." Catherine's eyes flicked to Sister Margaret, half hidden in a doorway, face unreadable. Some silent message seemed to pass. Catherine turned back with a forced smile. "Of course, Monsignor, St. Mary's has nothing to hide. But I must insist the enclosure of our cloistered sisters be respected. Some are in spiritual exercises that must not be interrupted." "My authority extends to all areas," Kelly said, holding the letter before her. No exceptions. What followed, later detailed in Kelly's 40-page report, unveiled horrors unprecedented in the modern church. The team split. Father Ryan led Kelly directly to the locked door as the other priests interviewed visible nuns and examined records. At the north wing, they found Sister Elizabeth blocking the corridor, pleasant face set with uncharacteristic resolve. "Mother has forbidden entry, Monsignor. Sisters are in retreat." "Sister Elizabeth," Kelly said gently but firm, "I speak with the Archbishop's authority. Open the door, or you will be in violation of your vow of obedience." Her composure cracked. "You don't understand what you're doing," she whispered, desperation showing. "He will be displeased." "He?" Ryan asked. "Do you mean Bishop Henny?" She only shook her head, eyes darting toward the windows as if expecting someone. After a moment, she stepped aside. The open door revealed a shocking scene. 5 nuns, including missing Sister Rebecca, confined in a former storage room. About 15 feet square, it contained thin pallets and a chamber pot. The single high window had been boarded over, leaving near darkness except for light now spilling in. The women were pale, malnourished, bearing signs of physical abuse, habits torn and soiled, faces gaunt with hunger and fear. One, identified as Sister Josephine, was heavily pregnant, her swollen belly jarringly incongruous with thin limbs. The stench was overwhelming. Father Ryan turned aside, fighting nausea. Kelly crossed himself. "In the name of all that is holy, what has happened here?" Sister Rebecca, once robust and quick to smile, skeletal now with hollow eyes, struggled to stand. "Father Ryan," she croaked, voice raw from disuse or from screaming, "you came back." "They're preparing us," she whispered as Ryan helped her to a chair. "For the doctor, for the house in Chicago." "What doctor?" "What house?" Kelly asked, kneeling beside her. "Dr. Matthews," Rebecca breathed. "He examines us to see who's suitable. Men pay more for nuns, brides of Christ. That's what Mother Catherine tells them." While Ryan and Kelly saw to the imprisoned women, food, water, medical care, the other priests made equally disturbing finds. In Sister Margaret's private quarters, accessible only through a hidden door in the infirmary, they found shelves of suspect medicines, laudanum, chloroform, and substances used to render patients unconscious. A leather-bound journal recorded treatments administered, with clinical notes about responses and suitability for transport. The financial review uncovered grave discrepancies. Though reporting minimal income, the accounts showed regular, substantial deposits far beyond what a frontier convent might earn. Coded entries referred to packages and special commissions, each aligning with a nun's disappearance. Transferred Sister Agnes O'Connor, May 1855. Commission $400. Package delivered to Chicago establishment. Condition excellent. Another more chilling. Sister Teresa Donovan, unsuitable for transfer due to resistance. Terminated November 1856. No commission. Through patient questioning of traumatized sisters, Kelly pieced together the truth. Catherine, Elizabeth, and Margaret were imposters, women who had infiltrated the church years earlier. Sister Claire offered critical testimony once safe. "I overheard them," she whispered, clutching a blanket despite the room's warmth. Mother Catherine called Sister Margaret by Catherine, arguing about their past. Said they'd come too far to risk exposure, that they'd changed identities before and would again. The real Mother Catherine Murphy had died shortly after arriving, poisoned, according to testimony from Margaret's former assistant. She added something to Mother's evening tea, the young nun said. That night, Mother vomited blood. Sister Margaret called it consumption and isolated her. None of us could tend her in her final days. The 3 leaders then seized control and established ties to a network of houses of charity across the Midwest, brothels serving wealthy clients with particular appetites. Young nuns, especially those noted for beauty, innocence, or gentleness, were prepared for a terrible fate. First isolation, harsh penances for fabricated faults, then drugging, laudanum from Sister Margaret's stores. Paying benefactors violated them within the convent itself. Wealthy men from Chicago, Milwaukee, even St. Louis paid premiums to defile brides of Christ. They came after Compline, Rebecca said flatly. Men in fine clothes smelling of cologne and whiskey. Mother led them to the north wing. They paid extra for us to wear our habits. Those who became pregnant, like Josephine, were kept until delivery, then transported to brothels in Chicago or St. Louis, forced into prostitution. Their religious status and coerced pregnancy marketed as special attractions. Many died within years from disease or abuse. Sister Margaret examined us regularly, Rebecca said. She tracked our cycles. If we missed bleeding, she laughed. Told Mother we'd be especially valuable. Men paid more for those with child. The orphanage served both as cover and as another pool of victims. Older girls nearing puberty adopted by generous benefactors in truth sold into the same network. Boys were placed as unpaid farm laborers, with fees collected by Mother. Those who resisted or threatened exposure met worse ends. Teresa Donovan, who'd questioned disappearances, hadn't gone to Montreal. Rebecca testified that Teresa was kept for weeks, repeatedly assaulted, and when unbroken, strangled by Callahan. Her body, and those of at least 3 others, lay in unmarked graves in the vegetable garden. Mother made us watch, Sister Claire wept. She said it was a lesson in obedience. Teresa prayed the rosary even as the rope tightened. As evening fell that April day, Kelly ordered St. Mary's closed immediately. The surviving nuns were removed to safety. Authorities were notified. Guards posted to prevent escape or destruction of evidence. Catherine, Elizabeth, and Margaret were placed under ecclesiastical arrest, confined to cells under watch pending civil custody. I was following orders. Elizabeth whimpered as she was led away. Mother said it was God's will, that the money was needed for the church's glory. Catherine kept a stone silence, pale eyes revealing nothing as her door closed. Only Margaret showed emotion, a strange half-smile. You understand nothing, she told Kelly. We serve a higher purpose than you can imagine. The church's attempt to handle the matter quietly soon unraveled. Callahan, absent during the inspection, returned after nightfall, then fled to Chicago upon seeing guards. By morning, when sheriffs arrived with warrants, Catherine and Margaret had somehow escaped their cells. Only Elizabeth remained, found kneeling in the chapel catatonic. The window was locked from the inside, reported the priest guarding Catherine's room. No sign of forced exit. It's as if she vanished. More likely, the mansion's long history hid secret passages, escape routes dating to its baronial origins, where illicit meetings and sudden departures were expected on a rough frontier. The civil probe revealed the operation's scope. Records seized from Catherine's hidden safe showed over $100,000 in transactions across 8 years, roughly $3 million today. Ledgers identified 23 nuns and 17 orphaned girls trafficked across the Midwest. Correspondence with Chicago, St. Louis, even New Orleans detailed specialized services and premium prices. A genuine sister of charity, untouched before our establishment, minimum $300, read one letter. Special requests, habit, religious implements, additional $50 per session. Pregnant sisters, $500 for exclusive patrons. Most damning, a small leather notebook sewn into Elizabeth's mattress, dates, names, and the fates of each disappeared nun. Some entries were chillingly clinical. Sister Agnes delivered to Chicago, September 1855, 400. Others disturbingly gleeful. Sister Teresa fought magnificently. Callahan enjoyed subduing her. Buried east corner of Beanfield, Novine, 1856. The notebook also referenced the doctor, identified as Dr. William Matthews, a once respected Chicago physician disgraced after allegations of improper conduct. He examined the nuns, certifying their health and, most disturbingly, their virginity, greatly elevating their value. Dr. M confirmed Sister Rebecca suitable for premium placement. One entry noted, recommends maximum usage before transfer to ensure appropriate behavior. Guided by the notebook's cryptic notes, authorities excavated the garden, finding the remains of 4 nuns in shallow graves among beans and herbs. Forensics, primitive yet thorough, confirmed strangulation. One victim, identified as Sister Mary Collins by a small St. Bridget medallion, appeared recently buried. Soil barely settled, likely killed just before or during Father Ryan's visit, perhaps after delivering the note that exposed everything. Sister Elizabeth Foster, born Margaret Wilson, was the only one of the three to face justice. Declared unfit for trial, she was committed to the state asylum, dying in 1863 having never spoken another word. Medical records describe her as catatonic, except at night, when she screamed about the master coming to punish her betrayal. Mother Catherine Murphy, real name unknown, and Sister Margaret Clark, later identified as Catherine Donovan, no relation to Teresa, vanished. Unconfirmed reports placed them in New Orleans, then Havana, running similar schemes with immigrant women, but they were never apprehended. A nationwide alert circulated their descriptions. Mother Catherine, about 45, 5'8", blue eyes, graying brown hair, faint Boston accent, projects unusual authority. Sister Margaret, about 45'10", very thin, dark eyes, black hair streaked gray, precise speech, medical terminology. Despite detailed descriptions and substantial rewards from civil and church authorities, the women disappeared into the American expanse. Occasional reports surfaced, 2 women boarding a New Orleans steamboat or founding a finishing school in Havana, but always gone before investigation. Callahan, James Callahan of Chicago, was captured 6 months later in a brothel raid and hanged for killing a police officer during arrest. Before his execution, he confirmed many details but claimed ignorance of the leader's whereabouts. They planned for it, he told the prison chaplain. Mother said they had routes ready, new identities waiting. They'd done it before, shed skins like snakes. Pressed about the master mentioned in Elizabeth's writings, Callahan grew agitated. Don't ask about him. He's not someone you want to know, not someone you want knowing you. Whether this master was delusion, a coded name for a high-ranking accomplice, or something else remains one of St. Mary's unsolved questions. No further documentation ever established his identity beyond cryptic references. The church moved quickly to contain scandal. Bishop Henney was quietly sent to a European monastery, spending his days in what records called prayerful reflection on administrative failings. His letters suggest torment beyond negligence. The blood of those poor women cries out, he wrote in 1860. I cannot sleep for hearing them. Catherine said the funds were for missions. I never questioned. God forgive me, I never questioned. The convent buildings were demolished. The land sold. Proceeds used to found a legitimate orphanage in Milwaukee. Official communications omitted mention of the bodies or crimes. The site was deconsecrated in a private ceremony, only Kelly and Hughes present, no public notice. Surviving nuns were dispersed and required to sign confidentiality agreements, threatening excommunication if they spoke. Most lived out their days in silent obedience, trauma unaddressed, suffering unacknowledged. Sister Josephine gave birth 2 months after rescue. Despite her pleas, the infant was placed with a Catholic family in Pennsylvania. The circumstances of birth sealed. The separation compounded her trauma. Records show she died by suicide in 1861, leaving a letter. I cannot forget. I cannot forgive. Not them, not the church, not myself. May God have mercy on us all. Sister Rebecca left religious life, defying imposed silence. Under the name Rachel Martin, she published The Dark Convent, 1865, an anonymous account later suppressed by Catholic authorities as Protestant propaganda. Surviving copies align closely with official records. She wrote, what happened at St. Mary's was not merely the work of 3 evil women. It was enabled by a system that values silence over truth, institution over person, reputation over justice. Until the church confronts this, there will be other St. Mary's, other victims hidden behind sacred walls. Suppression was swift. Church officials bought and destroyed copies. Catholic newspapers denounced it. Protestant presses, fearing lawsuits, ceased printing after the first run. Rachel Martin vanished from public record after 1866. Some evidence suggests she moved to California, establishing a home for women in distress. Father Ryan, hailed at first, was later reassigned to a remote parish as the hierarchy worried over scandal's fallout. His journal, found after his death in 1886, reveals continued struggle. I cannot forget the faces of those betrayed. I hear their cries in dreams. I see Rebecca's hollow eyes. I wonder about those we couldn't save, whose suffering continued in those houses. Has God forgiven us for failing them? Has he forgiven the church for silencing the truth? His final entry, January 1886, reads, 28 years since St. Mary's and still silence. Letters to Rome go unanswered. New bishops act as if it never happened. But it did. They were real women. If the church won't speak, I pray someone finds this and remembers Agnes, Bernadette, Teresa, and all the others. If this story chills you, share it with a friend who loves dark mysteries. Hit like to support our work, and subscribe so you never miss stories like this. Let's push on to the final, most disturbing chapter of this American tragedy. The aftermath extended far beyond Wisconsin. The exposure triggered heightened scrutiny of Catholic institutions across the Midwest. Inspectors conducted surprise visits to convents, orphanages, and schools. Smaller operations surfaced, none as vast or horrific as St. Mary's, but enough to suggest Catherine Murphy and her associates had set a template others followed. In Chicago, police raids on 3 houses of charity in late 1858 freed 9 former nuns and 13 young women coerced into prostitution. Their testimonies mirrored St. Mary's, religious authority used as cover for exploitation. Wealthy clients paying premiums to violate women perceived as pure. One survivor, identified only as M.L., linked her captivity directly to St. Mary's. I was transferred from Wisconsin in 1856. Mother Catherine delivered me to Madame Rousseau's house, warning that if I ever tried to escape, both church and law would punish me as fallen. I believed her for nearly 2 years. Brothel owners implicated prominent Chicago men as clients and investors, judges, bank presidents, 2 state legislators. Yet cases collapsed. Witnesses recanted or disappeared, evidence lost, judges issued peculiar rulings. The Chicago Tribune, Nova 1858, dryly observed, "It appears justice in our fair city extends only to those without powerful friends." In St. Louis, investigations were smothered more aggressively. Monsignor Kelly followed leads in 1859, suggesting 7 missing St. Mary's nuns had been sent there. Within days, he was brutally beaten by unknown assailants and warned off. Hughes recalled him at once, ending that inquiry. Kelly's private correspondence, unsealed in 1950, shows his frustration. We have uncovered only the visible portion of a greater evil. Its tentacles reach into the highest circles, perhaps even into the church. Powerful forces have determined this matter shall proceed no further. The survivors bore the worst consequences. 12 nuns rescued from St. Mary's needed support the church was unequipped to give. Even those not physically abused showed profound scars from years of fear, loss, and coerced complicity. Sister Claire, forced to help restrain Teresa during her murder, exhibited what we'd now call severe PTSD. Transferred to a Philadelphia convent, she was repeatedly disciplined for night screams and improper speech about St. Mary's. Records say she left religious life, was briefly institutionalized, and disappeared from history. The 5 rescued from the locked room, Rebecca, Josephine, Claire, Maria Fitzpatrick, and Anne Sullivan, had suffered the worst abuse. Josephine's end is known. Maria remained in the church but was described as unstable, prone to hysterics, dying in 1870 of nervous exhaustion. Anne Sullivan channeled her trauma into quiet advocacy, building informal support networks within the constraints of vows and enforced silence. Her letters, found after her death in 1899, show determination to prevent another St. Mary's while maintaining faith in the Church's ultimate good despite human failure. "We must distinguish between the divine and its human stewards," she wrote in 1875. "What happened to us was not God's will but human evil in sacred garments. Our task is to make those garments harder to steal." The true number of victims remains haunted by gaps. Officially, the church admitted 23 nuns and 17 orphaned girls trafficked or murdered. Yet Elizabeth's notebook mentioned rural acquisitions. Young women lured or abducted from isolated farms and settlements, never reported missing, fed into the network. Local newspapers recorded scattered vanishings within 50 miles. Servants returned east, farm daughters married west. Young widows seeking opportunity. How many were St. Mary's linked is unknown. One notebook entry, October 1857, suggests scope. Rural acquisitions this year, 14. Superior quality, primarily Scandinavian. Special commission to New Orleans fulfilled. Equally disturbing, the vanished nuns unaccounted for. Of the 23 who disappeared between 1854 and 1858, only 9 were definitively located, 4 murdered on sight, 5 later rescued. The others likely sold to further flung operations, New Orleans, San Francisco, possibly overseas. A partial answer surfaced in 1872 when a missionary in San Francisco reported a woman in a waterfront brothel claiming to be Sister Catherine Walsh of St. Mary's. By the time authorities followed up, she had died of typhoid, buried in an unmarked pauper's grave. The account's details aligned with known facts, though confirmation died with her. The enduring mystery is Catherine and Margaret, the architects. How did they originally infiltrate? Research suggests Margaret, true name Catherine Donovan, had briefly entered a convent in Ireland before expulsion for unspecified moral failings. She came to America in the 1840s and likely met her future accomplice there. Together they exploited the rapid expansion of Catholic institutions on the frontier as cover. Their disappearance sparked one of the largest pre-Civil War manhunts, conducted quietly to minimize publicity. Credible sightings placed them in New Orleans, Havana, and later Mexico City, always connected to charitable or educational institutions catering to wealthy patrons. A final credible report by a former Chicago detective hired by the New York Diocese placed them in Veracruz in 1863, running a finishing school bearing all hallmarks of their previous enterprise. His report concluded grimly, "They have wealthy protection." I was warned violently to abandon this. 2 local officials who agreed to assist were found dead the morning of our planned inspection. The legacy of St. Mary's reached beyond immediate tragedy. The case deepened anti-Catholic sentiment in the 1850s-60s. Protestant presses cited it in sensational forms as proof of Catholic depravity. Catholic communities in turn grew more insular and defensive, reinforcing the secrecy that enabled abuse. More importantly, St. Mary's established a pattern of institutional response that would echo through generations. Limited initial investigation, accountability focused on direct perpetrators, protection of higher authorities through negligence or complicity, relocation and silencing of survivors, then returned to normal with minimal reform. Archbishop Hughes, privately, acknowledged systemic failure while defending the Church's handling. "We removed the immediate cause and cared for the victims," he wrote to Rome, letters unsealed in 1975. Yet our oversight harbors flaws that allowed such horror to continue unchecked. I recommend a full review of how we select and supervise authority. His prescient recommendations were quietly filed rather than implemented. The preference for internal, discreet handling persisted into the modern era. Physical traces of St. Mary's were erased, buildings razed, land sold and resold. Now a suburban development, its residents unaware. Church archives were heavily redacted in the early 20th century. The most damning documents sealed or destroyed. Even the murdered nuns' graves went unmarked. Their remains eventually built over without consecration. Yet the story persists. In scattered documents, journals, old newspapers, and oral histories passed among Wisconsin Catholic families. Pieced together, these fragments reveal not only what occurred at St. Mary's, but the structural failures that allowed it, the danger of unquestioned authority, the vulnerability of isolated communities, and the human capacity for both extraordinary evil and extraordinary courage. Father Ryan's final plea resonates. Remember them. Remember they lived, they suffered, and it mattered. In recounting their story, even incompletely, we honor that request and perhaps learn something essential about power, vulnerability, and the vigilance required to protect the innocent from those who would profane sacred. Trust, the Wisconsin Historical Society, keeps a small collection on St. Mary's accessible. Only to credentialed researchers, among them a water-damaged letter apparently written by Sister Anne Sullivan in 1880 to Sister Josephine's adult daughter, the child conceived in captivity and adopted away. The letter was never sent. Anne couldn't find her. Its closing lines serve as an epitaph. Should you ever learn your origins, know this. Your mother was not shamed, but brave. The evil done at St. Mary's was not of God or true faith, but of human cruelty in sacred garments. The true convent was not those limestone walls, but the community of women who sustained each other through them, who whispered prayers and held hands in darkness, who remembered names when all else was taken, who believed in salvation even when God seemed absent. That is the legacy I leave, not only our suffering but our endurance. This mystery reminds us the darkest evils often hide behind the most sacred facades, and that institutional silence can prolong suffering long after the crimes. What do you think? Was everything revealed, or do secrets still lie buried in Wisconsin soil? Comment below. If you enjoyed this tale and want more horror stories like it, subscribe, hit the bell, and share with someone who loves mysteries. See you in the next video. The case of St. Mary's ultimately became a watershed moment in American religious history, though deliberately obscured from memory. The systematic investigation that followed the initial exposure revealed corruption networks far beyond Wisconsin, implicating church officials, businessmen, and politicians across the Midwest. Though the church attempted to frame the horror as isolated actions by three imposters, internal documents later leaked by conscience-stricken diocesan officials told another story. Bishop Henney received at least 7 letters, 1855, 1858, raising concerns about disappearances and financial irregularities. Each complaint was followed by a sizable special donation from Mother Catherine to the Cathedral Fund, and then filed away without action. A particularly damning 1856 exchange, a junior priest reported a blood-stained habit found in woods near St. Mary's. The bishop instructed him to return it with our compliments and assure the farmer. Theatrical performances at the convent sometimes employ red paint. A $500 donation followed 3 days later. Local historian Margaret Holloway, whose grandmother had worked as a domestic nearby, recorded an oral history in 1932, adding another layer. Grandmother said folks knew something was wrong. On still nights, screams came from the north wing. When asked, they were told it was spiritual exercise or penitential prayer. No one questioned further. Catholic practices seemed foreign and mysterious. Children ran past the grounds, afraid of the sad ladies in black watching from windows with empty eyes. In 1890, an elderly woman, Mary Callahan, sister of the executed James, appeared at the Pinkerton office in Chicago with a leather portfolio she claimed her brother had hidden. Correspondence between Mother Catherine and clients nationwide, financial records, and a list of clerical and political figures who patronized or protected the operation. My brother was no innocent, she told the agent. He did terrible things, but he was a servant. Before he died, he told me where to find these papers. He said to keep them safe until the principal architects had met judgment. Now they have. The agent, himself a devout Catholic, took the portfolio not to his superiors, but directly to Cardinal James Gibbons in Baltimore. The cardinal acknowledged receipt in a brief letter assuring appropriate action. No public investigation followed. The documents disappeared into archives. I have examined your materials, Gibbons wrote privately to Mary, a letter kept in her family records. Though I share your horror, I must consider the harm public exposure would cause to the faith of countless innocents. The primary malefactors have met divine judgment. The victims, God's mercy. Perhaps the greatest service is to let this darkness remain buried while ensuring it cannot root again. Mary's attempts to go public were thwarted. Newspapers declined to print without evidence. Her printer backed out after a visit from men in clerical attire. Her home was twice broken into, nothing of value taken. In 1892, she entrusted copies to her nephew. In 1908, a fire in Baltimore Archdiocesan records destroyed numerous documents, reportedly including the entire Callahan portfolio. Officials called it an accident. Former employees later claimed it targeted specific sections. Only St. Mary's and similar materials burned, said Thomas Moran, a former archivist, in a deathbed statement recorded by his son, 1947. I was told to store those together, against proper practice. When the fire came, it consumed exactly those shelves and no others. Draw your own conclusions. The final confirmed chapter came in 1912, when workers renovating an abandoned mansion in Veracruz, Mexico, discovered a hidden room holding the mummified remains of two elderly women. Among their possessions, Catholic religious items, forged identification in multiple names, and large sums of American and Mexican currency. Most telling, a small golden locket bearing a miniature of St. Mary's. As it appeared in the 1850s, the bodies were seated facing each other, reported La Verdad de Veracruz. March 12, 1912. They seemed to have died at once, perhaps taking evening tea, cups found before them. The tea contained traces of a strong poison derived from local flora. Suicide or murder unknown. Mexican authorities released the story. American papers picked it up. Several St. Mary's survivors, by then elderly, identified personal items as belonging to Mother Catherine and Sister Margaret. The women appeared to have died around 1880, living their last years in wealthy seclusion, but never escaping their secrets. Most disturbing was a leather-bound journal indicating they continued operations in Mexico for nearly 2 decades. Entries referenced acquisitions, placements, special clients, coded language identical to St. Mary's. The final entry, dated the day of death. He comes tonight. We have failed him for the last time. Whether he indicated a human patron or something metaphysical remains a puzzle. Some researchers point to esoteric religious currents among the wealthy in the late 19th century. Others suggest a powerful patron of their trafficking ring. Excavations beneath the garden found remains of at least 12 young women, buried over 2 decades. Mansion records suggested they were lured with promises of domestic work or religious training, only to meet fates akin to the nuns of St. Mary's. The evil that began in Wisconsin did not end there, wrote the New York Times in a rare acknowledgement. It migrated south like a cancer seeking new tissue to corrupt. The American Church's response to the Veracruz discovery was muted. A brief statement acknowledging that individuals formerly associated with the disbanded Wisconsin community were among the deceased, emphasizing they had been excommunicated and acted without sanction. No mention of trafficking or victims. Today, a small memorial garden stands in Milwaukee, ESD, 2010 by an anonymous donor dedicated to the forgotten women of St. Mary's. No official recognition, no names listed, yet each spring flowers appear, said to be placed by descendants of Sister Mary Collins, whose courage in slipping a note to a farm boy brought darkness to light. Amateur historians face odd obstacles. Records vanish from archives before scheduled visits. Permissions revoked without explanation. Researchers report strange occurrences, threatening calls, break-ins where only notes were disturbed, even physical intimidation by unknown men. Someone still prefers this story untold, concluded historian Rebecca Lawson in her 2003 piece, Buried Secrets, The Unfinished Investigation of St. Mary's Convent. To protect reputations or institutional credibility, powerful interests continue to obscure this dark chapter. The Wisconsin countryside has long since reclaimed St. Mary's land. New homes, new churches, new generations, unaware of what happened beneath their soil. Yet on certain autumn nights, when fog rolls in from the lake and wind whispers through trees, locals sometimes report faint sounds. Some say women's voices chanting evening prayers. Others, muffled cries for help, trick of wind or something else. Each must judge. In 2018, during construction near the former grounds, workers found a small metal box in a foundation trench, a rosary, a folded veil, and a handwritten list of names, 23 in total, inscribed, "Remember us." County officials gave the items to diocesan archives, where they reportedly remain uncatalogued and inaccessible. The family of Jimmy Fletcher, the boy who delivered Mary's note, keeps their own memorial. 5 generations maintaining a small kitchen shelf with a silver cross, believed to be the one Mary gave him, and a handwritten list of the nuns' names, updated whenever new information surfaced. Great-great-grandpa Jimmy said we must never forget those ladies, Robert Fletcher told a local paper in 2020. He said the truth gets buried sometimes, but that doesn't make it less true. They lived, they suffered, they mattered. What remains undeniable? Between 1854 and 1862, within the supposed sanctity of a Wisconsin convent, human evil reached extraordinary depths. That such evil was possible, and that systems meant to prevent it instead enabled it, stands as a sobering reminder of our capacity for depravity and denial. Perhaps the true horror of St. Mary's lies not only in what happened inside those limestone walls, but in how easily the world erased it once those walls came down. Remember Sister Agnes, Sister Bernadette, Sister Teresa, and all the others. Remember that they lived, that they suffered, and that their suffering mattered.